Folks, we hear people talk about divorce and remarriage and what the position is. The church sounds extremely harsh on those things. Why is that? Is there any logic or rationale to that? That's what we're chopping up today on Always On Conversations on Church and Culture with my boy, Gowi Odera, coming up in just a bit. Welcome back. It's part 3 of this.
More of me taking the punches,
part
man.
3 of this conversation. You said something. You said that you kind of explained in our previous episode about the position that the church has.
Yes.
And then you went kind of and said you take it a step further.
Yes.
And you say that under no circumstances is there grace for remarriage. And I didn't ask you, by the way, when you talk about the church's policy, if they are to remarry,
yeah,
would it be within a year, within 2 years? What's the time frame?
Let me take this question for
Okay.
this last one.
Okay.
There is a time frame because we recognize that, as I said once again earlier, I think it's episode number 1, that divorce also is like death.
Yes, you mentioned that, yeah.
And so, just like you go through the process of grieving, I think even in marriage it's the same. You grieve the loss, you grieve the pain.
Yeah.
You grieve all that. You go through the different stages or cycles of grief. And so we give time. And so in Nairobi Chapel, we give a time of about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
7 years for us to be able to see that this person has...
Hang on. So I've been divorced 5 years.
Yeah.
And I come and I say I'm ready to get remarried.
Yes.
I am outside the threshold. I'm outside the window.
Yes, you're outside the window.
Okay.
One said you come back in 2 years.
Ooh.
Let's see what.
My guy, won't I just go to the AGs?
And you're free to do that, my brother. You're free to do that. You're free to go to the AGs.
So why just
other churches?
help me understand why 7 years is such a long time. I've been married 7 years. I'm like, that's you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm trying to put in perspective. You were there at my wedding.
Yes.
So that's 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, that seems, you know, the government of Kenya will remarry me within 12 to 18 months.
Yes.
You know, I'll finish divorce, kila kitu. 12 to 18 months, I'm ready for another marriage.
Once again, I would say the government has a different standard from us. What we want to be able to establish that.
Are you guys out of touch? Anyway, go on. Sorry.
And it's a good question. We want to be able to establish that you've got over this.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, my experience and the experience from us in the church has been many of the marriages that have ended in divorce and one other person goes to remarry. The statistics show, okay, that there are more of those marriages that are broken again, have ended up in separation, divorce again. And why? It's because they have not fully got over that, or some of the issues in the previous marriage have not yet been resolved. So it just turns over and rolls over to this next marriage. So we want to be able to establish that has happened. You've healed over that process, the pain, the bitterness, the anger. You have accepted that the person you have become, okay, is something that you're not necessarily going to jettison.
Yes.
In the next marriage in itself.
Yeah. And
so we give it the place for time. Time is a place, it's a good place for healing, but it's also a good indicator of where your heart is in itself, okay? And again, marriages are there for life. And so if you're 5 years, you can wait another 2 years. What we want to be able to do is just establish. It's arbitrary. We have said those 7 years are what we think are a good one. People can have 5 years, people can do that, but we say 7 years is what we give time. And again, time for you to also think about it. Do you really want to do this or not?
To go through it again. And one of the things that I've heard, sorry for cutting you short, one of the things I've heard, I heard someone talk about this and say, you know, the government generally is not involved in counseling, in care, in, you know, in helping kids readjust. More often than not, the burden of that will fall at your doorstep.
Yes.
So there's almost like a higher threshold for you because The government is like, this is a legal document. It's a contract. You guys are done. But for the church, there's a sense that the care for this couple will fall on your laps.
Absolutely.
And that you see the devastation that it causes that sometimes the government doesn't see.
And you see, in as much as it is that, I think you're right, the government has the legal requirement. So you be even in the dissolution of the marriage and then another one, there's just a legal requirement in itself. As you rightly said, the responsibility falls on institutions like us in the church. But let me also go to say, we as the church have not done a good job in taking care and the restoration of those who divorce. We have not taken care of that.
I want to come back to that in just a bit.
Yeah.
But I asked you a question at the end of our previous episode that
Yes.
I'm just like,
Yes.
I don't want us to...
I was hoping you're not going to ask.
I don't want us to leave this. I'm like, okay, it doesn't sound very gracious. And my question is, okay, God, you say God hates divorce.
Yes.
He hates sin as well.
Yes.
But what I do realize is that I'm a sinner. And if I do sin and I make a mistake, God will forgive and he will restore. And I'm like, with divorce, if I end up divorced, is there no... Because your position was no remarriage. Man.
That is my personal position.
Yeah, and I said, yeah, that's fine. And I'm asking you, based on your position, is God gracious? Is he rough? Is he like, this is the law and this is... Nimesema na nimesema. He's put his foot down. Is there a place for me to come to God and cry and just say, God, I screwed up. I messed up. Give me another chance.
Yes, there is a place to do that. But the principle hasn't changed, my brother. The principle of marriage hasn't changed. Marriage is not something that you go into lightly. I want to emphasize that. To those
Marriage isn't something you go into lightly.
Because you know when you go in, okay, that this is for life. And if it does end up in divorce, you are covenanted here.
Mange, have we done enough, so as we come back, have we done enough to prepare people for that reality that this thing is for life?
Dude, I can tell
because
you.
we enter whimsically. Our eyes meet across the room and we fall in love at first sight. And I know I may be making light of it, but...
Actually, I think that is. Do we do a good job about it? I'm not sure. The jury is out. And again, the jury is out because we can see where a lot of marriages are.
Yeah.
But there are marriages that are thriving, my brother. There are marriages that are thriving. And I think that cannot be gainsaid on and on and on, in the sense that we need to be able to see that there are marriages that are thriving in itself. We hear, it's just like the airline industry. I mean, many planes are flying from one place to another, all millions of them. We only hear about the ones that crash, okay? And that's what we see in itself. So there are marriages that are thriving. Some are struggling, but there are also those that are thriving. So I want to emphasize here is that when we get into this, we need to recognize that there's no turning back. There's no exit clause, and the exit clauses are so. I'm trying to be able. The exit clauses, in your words, are harsh, but we need to get in that knowing, and so as a young person who gets into marriage, those are the things we need to be able to recognize. I remember when I got married, the preacher said,
I was there.
You're there, right?
I was there.
The preacher told me to look into my wife's eyes and say, are you saying, look at her? Okay? Look at, this is a sinner. This is somebody who's...
Oh, wow.
I'm like, really?
With her makeup and hair.
Really, this is
the
such
time
a...
to say this.
This is not the time. But he said, look at her. You know, she told me the same thing. He said, look, you are marrying a sinner, somebody who's prone to fail. But God is calling you to love them despite, and I dare say sometimes in spite of. And so we don't go into marriage.
That's so hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's so hard.
These are some of the hard teachings.
You're saying to me, love this person in spite of the things they do.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so that's why it sounds harsh, my brother. That's why it sounds, because love doesn't fail. But the contrary is love does fail, at least in the marriage. So we begin to say, did we really model love in that marriage? And we have to accept there are times we fail to do that. And is there grace? Of course there's a place for grace. And the grace happens in your restoration of your heart. If your marriage has failed, there's a restoration of your heart. All is not lost in itself. life can go on after marriage in itself. And I think that's the grace and restoration. Now, you'd say, Gowi, you've taken a very harsh position. That is my interpretation about it. God forbid that my marriage would end in itself. But I believe that if my marriage would end, I am bound to this thing. This is the principle. This is the principle. I am bound for the rest of my life.
My guy, how do we help? How do we help marriages then? Because you see, what you've said is, don't enter it flippantly.
No.
Don't enter it whimsically. But I'm already in. Yeah. So the girl got pregnant. We decided to get married.
Yes.
Or our eyes met across the room. Everyone said you guys mixed a cute couple. Instagram nini stories. But I'm already in.
Yeah.
And now my marriage is just in a horrible, horrible space. How do we help people who are already inside? What do we do as just human beings, but also as church people, to help people? Because it's tough, and people are really having it tough out there. How do we help people who are already in a difficult space?
There's a place for care. There's also a place for tough love. I think there's a place to go back and say, and call a spade a spade. You married this lady because you knocked her up. Okay? That was not
the ideal.
That was not the ideal reason to get married.
Yeah.
Or you were pressurized by your family to get,
Or maybe you just felt, my guy, I'm getting older.
Yes, it's time. Biological clock, things like that, okay? Those were not the right reasons. But now you're here. You make do with this marriage, That's, I'm saying there's a place for, if you really are committed to making this work, I think there's a place for the institution and the community of the local church to work with the marriage in itself. Have we done a good job? I'm not sure we have, Davy. I'm not sure we have.
Here's my thing. What do we do? How do we help? Like now, I know people friends of mine who are in difficult places.
Yes.
And I'm sure you must know people in your counseling who are in difficult places. How do I help them? What do I do?
First, I guess, is identify those individuals in itself. There's a place of approaching them and say, do you want help? Or do you need help? What sort of help? They identify what sort of help they can be able to get, and create the structures that can be able to walk these people through those. And again, I think there's the general way that we can do it, create marriage enrichment places where you grow in learning about that, but then there are bespoke processes that we can come specifically tailor-made to different couples. They could be mentors, coaches, small.
And where do I find those?
You find them in the church. And I want to say this specifically that I have said, and if you would allow me, about we at the Nairobi chapel.
Go ahead. Go ahead. People need resources.
Especially for the divorced, the divorcees. At the Nairobi chapel, we have, I think this ministry is now 7-8 years old, where is divorce care, where those who have gone through divorce, we have outreach, and I wouldn't even say it's outreach, a bespoke thing for you who have been divorced, that we could care for you through yours. In fact, there are also places for those who have children. There's also divorce care for children. So you could actually go through. We have not just therapy and counseling for those children, but also being able to take children through because their parents have
in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's going to be my next question.
Yes.
And my question is, my guy, as a church, have we screwed up this divorce care thing? Do you think we've done enough to take care of the divorced?
Can I give you a story?
I love stories.
Okay.
I love stories. But you'll answer the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's call her Amani.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Amani is a divorcee. She's been divorced and a member of my congregation.
It's a real story as
real
well.
story again.
All right.
But protecting...
identity.
And she once told me that in the women's ministry, one of the people says, literally suggests that she's not welcome here because she's divorcee. Why? Because she might infect others.
With what?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's so unfortunate.
And
that's so unfortunate.
Would not allow her, are suspect of her because, to talk to other men in the congregation, especially their husband, because to them, she's on the prowl.
Yeah.
I thought that was very...
She's on the prowl.
On the prowl.
This is a real story.
This is a real story.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness.
And this is a leader in the church who tells that.
That's terrible.
It is terrible.
That's terrible.
It is terrible. But that's the prevailing thinking in the church. And I'm not sure this is something that and it's come from the misunderstanding of that Malachi 3.
That God hates divorce.
Yes,
so he must hate you.
Yes, so he must hate you.
Yeah.
But it's contrary to that.
Yeah.
God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that if whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. So God does hate divorce. He doesn't hate the divorcee in itself. And so I would say, oh yes, we have not done a good job. We don't talk about divorce much. It's something we go in hush-hush. People who are divorcees are treated like lepers, the proverbial leper of the Bible, we'll put it over here. And I think that is unfortunate. There's a place for us to repent. Allow me just to even to look at the camera here and say, if we have done that to you as a church, we are wrong and we are sorry.
Yeah.
A church is a place where we should embrace people of all nature, going through all different challenges, including you, whose marriage has unfortunately failed.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just as we bring this conversation to a close, you mentioned there will be Chapel's divorce care. If I want information on that, where do I go?
You go to our Nairobi Chapel website. You can get our contacts on that, and we could definitely come.
I think that's so important because divorce care is so it's so critical,
and that's both for you as an individual, and if you have children, we also
there's care for them.
There's care for them.
I have to commend you guys for that. That's fantastic. I really like it.
Thank you.
Now, I look in the camera one last time.
Again.
Because let me tell you, there's someone who's watching this thing whose marriage is in just a terrible place. Maybe they've watched this thing, the different episodes, and they're like, not sure what to make of everything that you have said. Some things are difficult to hear, but they're in a difficult space. I want you to speak to them and say, what would you say to them? But the second person as well, who's already divorced, who's already in that space, and maybe they're watching this and learning some things and hearing, and they've got questions. As we close, let's speak to those two guys.
I think for me, there's a place for you who has gone or is going through these situations. I cannot begin to imagine what you're going through. And I don't say this just for the sake of me speaking to you on the camera, but I can only imagine that the pain, the anguish, the anxiety, fear, anger, bitterness, whatever emotion that you're going through, I think there's also a place to put it with what I'm calling the place of truth. What does the Bible say about the situation where you are going through? And there's a place where we need to be able to recognize, in the words of, I think it was Chinua Achebe who said, where did the rain start beating? There's a place of you accepting where or how you got this, and whatever case you may have contributed. Now, if you have not contributed in any way on this, there is also a place for restoration and accepting that whatever pain that has come on you, this is a place that you can receive God's healing and God's restoration over you. I would encourage you to turn to God for this. I think God in his gracious love can bring that to you. Bring your pain, bring your bitterness, whatever emotions that you have to God. If you're the person who has transgressed in this place, I would like to say there's also place for grace on your part. God forgives, and there's a place for repentance. There's also a place, I want to be able to say, there's also a place for restoration. And restoration in many places takes time. Restoration is about you reconciling with you, reconciling with your spouse, and reconciling with the reality of where you are. Maybe it is beyond redemption, at least in your perspective. But there's a place of you to reconcile with your partner and agree that it did not work with you. But it doesn't have to be contentious from this point on. Whatever the pain, if you have received the restoration, then proceeds to reconciliation in itself. And reconciliation can be, I go my way, you go your way, but we are always going to wish well on one another. If you have children, I'd say this is the best place for you to be able to agree on how to raise your children and raising your children, because in many ways, the children need to never doubt that they are loved by their mom or by their dad. And so there's always a place where you need to agree on that. You may not agree on how you're going to live together, but I encourage you to find a way on how you agree to raise your children in that way. And there's also lastly a place of living right. There's a place of living righteous. The fact that now you're no longer married does not give you license to live and go amok. And so there's a place also for holy living in itself. And so there's a place for you to continue to live right with God, continue to live in purity and honoring God and your commitment to God. I hope with these words you are encouraged or could begin that journey of embracing your situation and your journey to restoration and reconciliation.
Gowi Odera, I'm so glad that you came. If I invite you to come back, I've enjoyed this so much. If I invite you to come back, are you coming back? Look, it won't be as contentious, but I would love to have you back. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you. I'd love to come back.
Yeah.
On a
later.
Hey, this is I've been sweating on this seat.
But it's an important one, and I'm so grateful. Thank you, guys. This is part 3. We've done a 3-part series on divorce and remarriage with Gowi Odera. It's always on Conversations on Church and Culture. I want to say this: if you know someone who needs to listen to this conversation, please share it with them. Find a way to get the links, subscribe, share them on social media, make sure that people get them. Always on. God bless you.